Before we begin, the title is written in the right-hand corner of the screen. Enjoy watching. The story begins with a girl having a rest at an event, looking around and suddenly noticing that some guy is gradually approaching her. At first she thought it was a coincidence and she just imagined it. But then, he started to look her straight in the eyes and it became clear that he was coming to her. The girl was scared, but at the same time, she was curious to know what was going on and what he wanted. After a few minutes, he was literally a meter away from her, and for some reason, lowered his head down and began to cry. The lady asked if she could help. The new answer heard nothing. After that, he started to blame himself even more. And from that moment on, she was completely confused and stopped understanding what she could have done that made him cry. He started to beg her for forgiveness and said that until she forgave him, he wouldn't go anywhere. Sienna looked at him with surprised eyes and asked for an explanation. She really didn't know this man and had no idea how to react to this. After all, it wasn't out of the question that he just mistook her for some other girl. She is very curious about what he is apologizing for, because she doesn't know a single person to be offended by. Even so much so that such a situation could happen. She tries to get to know him, but unfortunately, nothing works out. As soon as he lifted his head up slightly, Sienna saw his handsome face and thought that perhaps it was some kind of gift of fate. She liked him immediately, especially his eyes and overall cute appearance. It's strange why such an attractive man suddenly started apologizing. Very interesting when he will explain everything and elaborate on why she should forgive him. She's already got a few options, and the most realistic one is that he's probably just mistaken her for someone else. When suddenly, the guy says he's sorry, but he has to break up their engagement. But what engagement? Because she can't even remember him. He repeated several times that he didn't have to break up, and he did it in a way that made her feel really sorry for him. The guy clearly regretted it, except that there were more and more questions every minute. The situation is so bizarre that it's impossible to believe that they could have had a relationship, and yet someone might not remember each other. Afterwards, the stranger said they would send a letter to her family home tomorrow and apologized again. From that moment on, the girl started to get very nervous. She asks one thing and he says something else. It's just impossible to listen to it. The very last moment, he started to say something about God's will and keeping clean. He says these words, and one can sin well, how he doesn't want to talk about it. After that, he apologized again and said that he would have to say goodbye. Sienna didn't have time to say anything back. Her thoughts were more confused than ever before. She remained standing in the same place and noticed that she had completely stopped noticing everyone around her. Now she was only interested in one thing, what it was, who this person was, and why she didn't remember him. She felt a little funny because it looked like a joke. The words about the engagement and the breakup had ended up confusing her and creating a lot of unanswered questions. She's getting a little hysterical because it was a really serious conversation, and it would be really bad if she couldn't remember anything. And suddenly, she's asked herself where she is and who she is. Things seem to be a lot more confusing than they originally appeared to be. Now on the dating site, everyone is looking out the window and seeing that it looks like the girl got a real shock. The girl even got a nervous laugh, and judging by the words, this has happened twice already. To be dumped not once, not twice, but 3 times at once. It's just unnoticeable. The girls who saw it think that if they were in her place, they wouldn't have the courage to show themselves in society again. Which means they know a lot more than Sienna itself. They look at it like it's some kind of museum piece that you only get to see once a year. Just when she had the urge to run away from here as far away as possible, she was suddenly approached by someone who looked a lot like her. At least she had the same hair color. She asked if everything was okay, and after a few minutes, Sienna suddenly realized who it was. The girl called her mom, and she was very surprised. She said it unconsciously, and it's very strange because she's not even sure if it's someone she knows. In response, the woman said that the girl's face had turned too pale. She offered to go home, which meant that she already looked more like her mom, at least judging by her words and attitude towards Sienna. It turns out that wasn't all. As soon as she heard the woman call her by her first name, Sienna, she wondered if the name seemed too familiar. Meanwhile, the carriage arrived, her mother helped her in and suggested she relax. She thought her daughter was too nervous and needed to calm down. The girl was rarely at these events, so it was no surprise to her. All the way they talked about something good I was on purpose, just to make Sienna feel good and not think about the bad stuff. Hours passed from that moment. Evening came. They came home and went straight to her room. Mom immediately opened all the windows to air the room, had an aide bring a glass of cool water, and started asking if she felt any better at all. The woman asked her daughter to rest at least a few hours, because so far she doesn't understand what happened to her, because it had never happened before. As soon as her mom left the room, Sienna suddenly thought that maybe it was just a dream, and that's why everything was too weird, and some people she didn't know at all. She immediately got out of bed and started thinking about it. Most of all, she doesn't understand why the name her mom called her was so unfamiliar to hear, like it was someone else's name. At some point, she got very tense and tried to remember everything she could. It took Sienna about 10 minutes, and by some miracle, the girl remembered something. She was hit by a truck. She remembered it very well, and it was like she felt the same sensation one more time. It was just awful. Except there's one very important thing. She remembers herself as a girl with dark hair. Even her room looked different. Sienna looked in the mirror and saw a completely different person in the reflection. She doesn't even know how to react to that and whether it's good or bad. They say that before you die, your whole life flashes before your eyes. That's what the girl felt when she was about to die. From her oldest childhood memories to the moment a huge truck drove at her, all the scenes from her life flashed through her mind like a film from a movie. She saw even things that she had completely forgotten about and never once remembered since it happened. There were even the most insignificant situations that one might not even remember about. However, something strange happened. In addition to her usual life, she also saw many memories of someone else. There was the same guy who suggested breaking off the engagement, but there he was with a smile. And a few hours ago, he had tears and reluctance to do it. As suddenly, the girl recognized them by familiar names and dialogues from her memories. This girl is none other than the heroine of the novel she read last night. It's called The Despicable Leopard Princess Must Save the World. And this unremarkable secondary character, Sienna Ethereal. After all these scenes in her head, a very sharp pain suddenly ran through her body. Fortunately, she lost consciousness rather quickly. She did not have to suffer and endure this terrible agony. Meanwhile, the girl still could not realize all that had happened to her. First she understood, and then again, she could not believe that such a thing was possible. To recover, she started washing her face and giving a light facial massage, but in the end, nothing helped. No matter how hard she tries to go back, Sienna begins to realize that this is her new reality, and she can't escape it. Gleaming with gold hair and sparse blue eyes, it was not at all the appearance she was accustomed to. Slightly rounded, but expressive facial features. This is the appearance that can only dream of. At first it was unusual, but now the girl was able to get used to it, and even thought how she could be a brunette before. She really liked the blonde hair color. But if this change had happened a little differently, it would have been a lot easier to accept. And as it was, she was suddenly a different person. Sienna Ethereal, she was one of the protagonist's close friends in the novel she read the night before her death. The action takes place in a magical world called Delcado, where each noble family represents an ancestral beast and possesses the corresponding magical powers. Rosetta was the youngest daughter of the head of the Hayes family of the Leopard family, but unlike her relatives, she had no special abilities. Rosetta was not gifted with any strength, and therefore grew up being humiliated. However, she soon began to reveal her hidden talents. It was very unexpected for both others and herself. She perfectly and easily solved the unpleasant incidents taking place in Delcado. By the end of the novel, she becomes a powerful heroine, and saves the world from an evil magician who wanted to destroy it. Thus, Rosetta gained the recognition and love of many other characters. In the finale, as is expected in romantic fantasy, Rosetta and the other main character are married. Although they initially had a strained relationship, it's a story with a good ending, albeit a very ordinary one. However, the question arises as to why she ended up in the body of a character who doesn't even appear in the main plot. The unremarkable and insignificant daughter of her family. This is clearly not a role to be excited about. Sienna Ethereal. a minor character who was dumped as much as 4 years ago in the novel, causing her to be universally reviled. Moreover, the reasons for the breakup each time were bizarre and even ridiculous. The first groom preferred to take Sienna's maid as his wife, and then, with a smile, said goodbye and shook goodbye to the... And the second ran away with his own servant. He sent a letter, where he said that he found true love and everything that was between them. Just a mistake, which should be forgotten and never remembered. The third groom declared that he intended to devote his life to the service of God, and then broke off the engagement and became a priest. And the last groom to cancel the engagement was the novel's main male character, Duke Isaac Richard of the Lion family. Sienna was abandoned by Isaac in front of the entire socialite community, all because she proved too boring for the Duke to handle. And then Rosetta, first appearing in high society, stands up for Sienna. This was the beginning of the romantic story of Isaac and Rosetta. Thus, all of Sienna's misfortunes were just a means for the protagonist to meet. The girl couldn't accept it for a long time. She thought it too cruel, for to be disgraced not once but 4 times for the same reason was too much. Objectively speaking, it's a very cruel scenario. She wonders how a girl who's been through it all can believe that true love will come into her life. She'd be more attentive to everyone she meets, especially those who try to make her their wife. Anyway, since she's already in Sienna's body, who's going to have to deal with this and more than once, something needs to be done about it. At the very least, it wouldn't hurt to come up with some sort of plan. She thought it would be nice to be in the shoes of a protagonist with incredible hidden talents. Instead of all this, how suddenly, the girl wondered what happened to Sienna after the breakup. It's very important, because you need to understand what to count on and what awaits her next. After the breakup with Isaac, Sienna becomes a close friend of Rosetta, but her whole role as a character is to occasionally admire the beauty and abilities of the protagonist. She does not appear in any of the important events. Even at the end of the novel, at the wedding of the main characters, she is present simply as part of the family and nothing more. Maybe it's even better. She won't have to risk her life or face any unpleasant situations. She's just a minor character who won't be in danger of anything. Meanwhile, Sienna remembers the moment when the man who apologized to her today said he would become a priest, meaning that this was the third groom. So that leaves only the last one, Duke Isaac Richard. The girl thought that if she could endure it, her life would finally get better, and she wouldn't have to be afraid of something like this, because it wouldn't happen anymore. It lifted her spirits a little, and made her hope that if she could manage and wait it out, everything would be fine, and she could relax. She's decided she can handle everything and make her life not as delicious as it should be according to the storyline. Water, fire, wind, earth families in the Delcato world have different magical abilities. The family into which it has fallen are descendants of the genus duck, and therefore it can only slightly control the water and move freely in it. Isaac's abilities are incredible in comparison. He's a true genius of his kind who is only born once a century and has the power of a dark lion. Isaac's powers are so amazing that he can easily burn down an entire village. Moreover, he also has the gift of healing, and having a healer in the family has always been extremely rare and joyful. For his incredible talents, he was recognized at his young age, and as early as 17 years of age, he became the head of the Richard family. One wonders why such a prominent person would want to be engaged to Sienna. The girl often thinks about it, but she's never been able to find the answer to that question. At some point, she decided she didn't have to care. They'd break off the engagement anyway and wouldn't have any more contact. After that, she went to the balcony and started to admire the beautiful view. She thought that if at least once a day she went to this place, she could forget about all her problems and become a little happier person. She loves her spacious new bedroom, which can't be compared to the tiny apartment she lived in her previous life. And of course, she is delighted with the huge, beautiful, well-maintained garden, the size of a soccer field. Looking at it makes you think of something beautiful. Though the Orris family is inferior in wealth and influence to the Richards, they are still a family of high status. In any case, for now, the girl decided not to think about it, because anyway, she cannot affect anything. You just have to wait for the moment when everything is over and you can start to enjoy life. Right now, she's more interested in this than divorces and engagements and guys who'll betray her. Sienna wanted to enjoy her room as much as possible to get a feel for how nice and comfortable the place was. Meanwhile, the next day came. Today the girl woke up much later than usual. She couldn't even be woken up the first time by the assistant. She came several times and she didn't manage to do anything. Sienna can't hear anyone. It's like she fell asleep a few minutes ago. It's strange that she couldn't get a good night's sleep, though perhaps she has such a comfortable bed that she could sleep on it forever. Suddenly, she heard someone's voice again, but she decided to ignore it because she didn't want to wake up, much less get out of this beautiful bed. She already has a lot of hatred for this man who also treats her so much since the morning. The girl does not understand, really. Cannot leave her alone and wait until she herself wants to wake up and leave the room. When suddenly, she heard also a male voice, and from that moment, a little surprised. She does not understand who can enter her room, except the assistants. At some point, the girl couldn't stand it and asked what they wanted from her. She started to get indignant, but for some reason she didn't see anyone. Sienna does not understand anything because she heard perfectly well that just now someone woke her up. It is very strange, because the voice suddenly disappeared and there was no sound of someone closing the door or leaving the room. A few minutes later, she hears that male voice again, but still, she sees no one in the room. She even thought it might be a ghost, and at one point that voice asked that she look down, at which point the girl sees a little chicken in front of her, who is clearly unhappy about something. Sienna looked at him and he said he finally managed to wake her up. He even thought it was impossible. It turns out to be a small duck that has unknowingly ended up in this room. She's outraged that Sienna is surprised as if she's never seen a talking duck before. It seems like she's about to go crazy. So much has happened lately that she won't have time to get used to it. She can't tell what's normal and what's not. She has a talking duck in her room who resents that the girl is surprised by it. For a moment, she wondered that in this world, talking lions, red tigers, wolves, there was nothing surprising about it. So a talking duck could very well exist. After that, she immediately took it in her arms and started hugging it like it was her favorite pet. Of course, the duck didn't like that a little bit. She started screaming and asking how dare a girl touch her without permission, and so rudely. The duck warned that if Sienna didn't let her go right now, she would have to well up and make it so that she never wanted to come even a kilometer close to her again, let alone pick her up again. The girl let go immediately and said she didn't know she would hate it so much. She promised it would never happen again and was a little scared. Anyway, the meeting didn't go well. Sienna tries to pretend she's calm, but sometimes she doesn't succeed. After a while, she decided to find out who this duck was and what she was doing here. She obviously didn't just show up here for nothing. It would be very interesting to find out about that. In response, the duck promised that she would tell you about it a little later. But for now, she really wanted to regain her strength and have a good breakfast. She asked me to feed her, and preferably something very tasty, as it would determine her mood for the rest of the day. At first, the girl was a little indignant, because before demanding something, it would not hurt to introduce yourself and answer all the questions. And they are not so many. She thought it was too outrageous. The duck hadn't said anything and was already demanding food as if she owed it something. Anyway, she couldn't leave the cute creature without food, so she'd have to feed it and do what it asked after all. As suddenly, being near the door, she happened to hear two maids talking about the young mistress being rejected again. At first, she did not understand what the conversation was about, so I decided to listen some more. One of the maids says she heard the groom was going to be a priest or something like that. It turns out they know in advance that the guy is going to break off the engagement, and apparently it's about the guy she met at the event. Once the girl realized what they were talking about, she didn't feel like continuing to eavesdrop. She closed the door and regretted remembering again what was about to happen. In any case, the girl was once again convinced that if she wanted to know something, it was enough just to listen to the conversation of the assistants. So you can find out either the latest news, or gossip, or something else interesting. In the end, she didn't notice that she was eavesdropping again, because everything they were talking about was really interesting. At any moment, she might find out something else that no one would ever tell her about. The maids are very much interested in why the Lion family chose their mistress. They do not understand why Dylan reported that the Earl had received a letter this morning. As soon as they were talking about this topic, the girl decided to come closer, and they didn't even notice it. She asked if she could join them, because she was also very interested in finding out all the details. The maids immediately started apologizing for prying. They admit that they should have been discussing other people's business behind their backs, and promised that it would never happen again. In response, the girl said that they do not need to apologize. In addition, she completely agrees with them. The girl did not punish them because she understands that she has them together. She would not hold back and start discussing everything that has happened recently. She said, "The fact that the Lion Clan is interested in their family is really very strange. So she, as well as they, don't understand why they decided to send them an offer letter." In her previous life, the girl always dreamed of having her own house, and now she has a whole mansion, and to enjoy life in peace. She will only have to marry once and after a while. Just divorce, that's all. And even the servants who take care of her and do all the housework will stay here forever, and that's just fine. It's for real. The perfect life that she thought only happened in fairy tales before. She thought it wasn't even worth dreaming about. But now, soon it will be like this every day. At this moment, the maids began to get very anxious, for they were sure that the lady had gone through the divorce very badly, and that it was better not to remind her of anything connected with it. Though in fact, quite the contrary. She did not care for it at all. She was only waiting to get married and divorced as soon as possible. Mrs. hinted that they were free to talk about the subject, even without her consent and certainly among themselves, and at any time if they were genuinely interested. Meanwhile, she started to take some bread with her. The helpers tried to stop her and told her they would be making lunch shortly. The girl replied that she was already getting hungry, so she would have a little snack and wait for the main meal. It turns out it wasn't what it looked like from the outside. That bread she only took with her to feed the duck. Did she really remember it? Sienna watches the duck gobble, and in that moment, it's like she's even cuter. She likes watching it, and feeling like a person who has someone to take care of her. Perhaps the gods gave her the duck as compensation for her ridiculous death at too young an age. The girl turned to the god and told him not to prepare anything further for her. Either way, she would always be grateful for it. She asked him for only one thing: to let her break her engagement to Duke Richard, so she could enjoy her life as Sienna without a care in the world. When suddenly, a man walks into the room unannounced, crying and obviously worried about something. At one point, he started looking for the duckling, which means he's probably the owner of it. And from the looks of it, the man is the head of the family. But the first thing he did, instead of looking for the duckling, was to go up to his daughter and hug her really hard. And then he took pity on her and said he was sorry she had such a hard fate. Sienna clearly didn't expect something like this. She doesn't even know how to react to it or what to say to him. Luckily, she was lucky to have her father. He was much kinder than one would think he would be. At some point, she noticed that it became very hard to breathe. The girl began to gasp for breath and could barely tell her father to stop hugging her so hard. After that, he immediately asked her not to worry and told her that he had already found her a much better fiancé than that traitor. It seems he was really pissed off and intended to rectify the situation. He asked his daughter to listen attentively to all he was about to say, and then briefly to the fact that her new fiancés, Duke Isaac Richard, the guy any girl dreams of marrying, he is sure his daughter will appreciate his efforts and be very grateful. Of course, since Sienna knew perfectly well who her next husband would be, she purposely pretended that it was very unexpected, and of course that she was very happy. Supposedly, it was the best news she could ever know. The father says that now his daughter doesn't have to worry about being alone, because she will have the best husband she could ever dream of. The girl tried to pretend that she was genuinely pleased to feel his care, but at the same time, she felt very hurt that no matter how hard her father tried, no husband would be as wonderful as she would like to be. She realizes that her father tried very hard, but knowing that it doesn't make any sense is a little frustrating. The girl sees a happy father, and she really wishes he wouldn't get too upset when it seems that the Duke isn't at all what he seems now either. That guy is no different from the one she's been with before. He'll betray her just like all the previous ones. So you just have to be prepared for it and not get too upset. In the meantime, the maids started to help her. They did her hair and makeup and picked out the most suitable dress. It seems that this dress is even lusher than yesterday's. And that's even better. She'll have to get used to having these preparations even without an occasion. Like now, she just has to go to lunch. Meanwhile, she learns that the Duke has already arrived. In a few minutes, they will have to greet each other and pretend that they were looking forward to this meeting. Sienna just started to go down to the first floor as she saw him, and she started to get more and more nervous by the minute. She doesn't know how to act in the situation, considering this fact that she knows beforehand what kind of person he really is. If she could, she'd cancel the meeting and tell him she didn't want to see him. But unfortunately, they'd have to have lunch together and more. And it's very uncomfortable for her to move around in that outfit, and the huge staircase, and it's a bit of an ordeal in shoes. The girl doesn't understand how people endure such torments all day long when they go to an event where they have to go up to the second floor several times and back down to the first floor. As suddenly, she begins to fall and realizes that the first meeting is already ruined. If she manages to stay conscious after such a thing, you can consider that a miracle has happened, because to fall down the stairs in such shoes is very dangerous. Her mom and dad were so scared they almost passed out. They didn't have time to react, and the only thing they could do was hope their daughter would be okay. She'll probably throw all those shoes out of her closet forever. At this moment, Sienna was certain that if she did fall, she would definitely die. She really wished it would happen again as ridiculously as it had the previous times. When suddenly she felt that it did not hurt at all, and then she felt the touch of someone and realized that a miracle had happened after all. And it was the Duke. He asked if everything was all right, but for now, Sienna didn't even have time to realize what had happened. She was already resigned to the fact that she could die, but he saved her and acted like a real Duke. The girl wondered if she had ruined the meeting after all, or, on the contrary, made it memorable for the rest of her life. At least for now. The guy is smiling. It's hard to tell he's unhappy about anything, though maybe he's just hiding his real face to make himself seem better than he really is. It's like the girl's speechless. She's trying to say something, but he can't do it. She couldn't believe that she was looking at the Duke everyone was talking about. She had forgotten for a moment how their relationship would end and what he would do to her, and felt as if she was falling in love with this man. He's so handsome that now she doesn't even want to think about what she was planning just a few minutes ago. She's changed her mind drastically and apparently fell in love with him so wholeheartedly, as if she doesn't know what the future holds for her. She began to admire his appearance, every part of his face, his eyes, his gaze, and of course his beautiful voice, which seemed to mesmerize and fall in love with her from the first moment. Sienna herself realizes that she's overreacting emotionally to him, but for some reason, she can't help it. Because of this, she becomes even more nervous. The girl is finally confused and does not know how to treat him. Just recently she hated him, and now does not know how to start thinking badly about him again. It's been about half an hour, lunch is ready. Sienna offered not to roll it back, but then, because she realizes that everyone is already hungry, since you can get acquainted during dinner, there was no point in staying hungry and standing in the living room. In fact, she just wanted a change of scenery. She started eating a lot and didn't notice that she had already eaten 2 portions while the others hadn't even managed half of the first plate. Sienna felt very awkward, but once he started looking at her and didn't look away, she didn't know where to go anymore. As soon as he starts smiling, the girl feels even worse and thinks that he's about to start laughing at her. The guy hardly says anything, so it is impossible to understand what his first impression is. She really doesn't want to seem like some weird girl and make a bad impression. Sienna immediately started apologizing and said she wasn't as inconsiderate as he might have thought she was. And then she introduced herself, but even this was difficult. At one point, the girl noticed that she had forgotten even her own name, and yet, with difficulty, but she managed it. All this time, by them being silent and not saying a single word, I get the impression that he's either frustrated or just doesn't want to create an awkward situation. Sienna once again made sure that as soon as she gets nervous or very anxious, she immediately starts saying all sorts of stupid things and doesn't notice how it happens. For example, now she started asking if he likes dessert pudding and something like that. It seems like this situation couldn't be worse. She is so unhappy with herself and what she just said that she wants to vanish into thin air or turn back the clock so she never acts like this again. In order for the girl not to be too nervous, he started talking to her father and pretended as if everything was fine. The man noticed this and started to keep the conversation going, just so that the rain would calm down a little bit and he would be able to talk normally. He began to smile and was glad that no one was confused, and the awkward situation hadn't lasted as long as it could have. After some time, the man suggested that the newlyweds talk in private, because this way they can get to know each other better, and no one will embarrass them. The girl's mother supported the idea and suggested that Sienna take a little tour and walk with him at a nearby lake. In her opinion, the place was perfect for such an occasion. No one resisted. They went straight out for a walk and started admiring the incredible views. Plus, when they stopped looking into each other's eyes, it became much easier. At some point, Sienna got tired of being silent, started talking, and decided that she needed to fix the situation immediately, because if she did nothing, it would only get worse. The first thing she asked was if he liked their lake, but for some reason, he looked at her like there was something strange about that question, and then said briefly, "Supposedly really beautiful here," then stopped looking at her, as if he was offended or wanted to tell someone that. I get the impression that when he was in the presence of her parents, the guy purposely looked polite and was much more talkative. But now, he's not paying attention to her. Sienna began to ask questions one by one about the weather, the lake, his mood, today's lunch, but in reply he kept answering with just one word. To keep going, she came up with a question about whether he could swim, and of course, this time there was no miracle. The answer was, "Yes, I can swim a little bit." It's like she's talking to a stone wall, like she's trying to show everyone that she's not interested in being here. Sienna is getting more and more nervous with every strange answer he gives. She doesn't know what she's doing wrong, and at what point things have gotten even worse than they were initially. She wondered why he'd decided to send her a letter of proposal. Because the way he was talking to her, he'd either been forced to do it, or there was some kind of profit in it for him. And it had nothing to do with feelings or anything like that, except that the answers the girl heard were clearly meant to sound something else. The guy said he himself didn't understand what he did it for, or why he did it. And then, asking if she jumped to conclusions about love at first sight, he insinuates that there is no love yet, and that she shouldn't dream about it, or think it's serious. According to him, Sienna is certainly a very beautiful girl, but as it turned out, she was not at all his type. She heard this and was instantly disappointed in this man. She thought that if someone proposed marriage, there must be some feelings or sincere desire to be together. It turned out that Sienna already knew that she wasn't the kind of girl the guy saw in his future, because his type was the elegant Rosetta. It turns out that the engagement becomes even more pointless. With each passing minute, she begins to doubt whether she needs it at all, and whether it's worth wasting time on this man who loves another girl. In response, he explained that indeed, a reasonable reason is hard to find. The question arises as to why he needs it and how long it will last. He found it amusing that Sienna had broken up 3 times already, and that she had had so many failed relationships. But it was unclear why he brought it up and what he was trying to say. At this point, the girl was a little surprised and decided to ask if she had understood everything correctly, for she had only one question now, viz., did he send her a letter of engagement because he thought it was funny that she had been broken up 3 times and had not yet succeeded in finding the one man with whom she would live happily and love him for the rest of her life? In reply, the boy replied with a smile that it was all right. In the same second, she realized that initially, he seemed much better than he actually turned out to be anyway. It was good that he was telling the truth as it really was and not trying to hide anything. But laughing at being dumped 3 times is not at all the act of a decent guy who can be respected, and even more so, treated well. Now, he deserves none of that, unless of course he tries to apologize. She even thought she might have to give up and leave him. But then she changed her mind and decided to endure. Rosetta needs the power of the Black Lion to save the world. In one of her future battles, Rosetta will be horribly wounded, and the one who will save her from imminent doom, Duke Isaac Richard. If he doesn't do it, the girl dies and everything goes wrong. They have to meet and get to know each other in this situation and no other way. The thing is, If Sienna turns him down now and changes the course of events even a little, fate will not bring them together at that ball, and Rosetta will end up dying from her wounds. Accordingly, there will be no one to save the world. All this is necessary for her comfortable life. You just need to let events take their course. The girl began to believe that she is unshakable and will be able to reach the end to get what she wants and forget about it forever. And all that's left to do is smile sweetly and make it seem like it's not such a big deal. Although in any other situation, she'd just walk away and forget this person forever. It's odd that the Duke doesn't even try to apologize for what he said or think about the fact that it's not a nice thing to hear, especially from someone who smiles and thinks it's so easy to talk about it so calmly and easily. Sienna tries to smile, though it's very difficult. Right now, she really wants to reply with something similar to make him feel how unpleasant and wrong it is of him. He obviously rarely gets unpleasant words said to him, so he has no idea what it feels like. Everything was quite tolerable, but until the moment he started laughing at her laughter, the girl felt as awkward as possible and wanted to go to her room. Just when she was wondering why she was even talking to him and what was stopping her from going far and long, when suddenly, he takes her hand and starts kissing it. Did he have a conscience? And someone wanted to apologize? It turned out that this was his way of saying goodbye, and of course not without a smile. The Duke said that he would be waiting for her at the ceremony, and hoped very much that she would not change her mind. At this point, the girl's parents were watching them from the window. The father was most pleased. He even asked his wife if she had seen the Duke looking at their daughter, except that, unfortunately, he has no idea what he is really like, and that there is no sincerity in this relationship, and there will be none. They don't see the real thing and are sure that everything is much better than it really is. And worst of all, the parents don't even question the fact that Isaac is crazy about Sienna. According to the man, the Duke's look is reminiscent of the look he had when he met his wife. They immediately had fond memories and joy that the children will have the same. In order not to postpone important matters until later, the woman decided to do it right away, and right now. She decided to order a wedding dress, and her father suggested to immediately send out an invitation to everyone who will be at the wedding. Sienna looks at it and realizes that all this effort is in vain. They will soon break up anyway, and there is no point. Now her mother suggests going shopping, and she is in no mood for it. She has no other choice. She has to play along for a while. She really wants everyone to be happy and not too upset in the end. Meanwhile, they are already in the store and can't decide which dress is better. The girl's mom wants to choose the best, but she does not even notice that, in fact, the daughter does not care about it at all. It is not a real wedding, and she does not want to spend a lot of effort and energy because no one will appreciate it, especially the groom. At the most unexpected moment, some girl with red hair came up to them. She greeted them and said that she was very sorry that the girl had such a situation, and after that, said that everything would get better soon. Sienna recognized her. It was Mrs. Sheriel. The girl remembered her as a character from the original story. She is the mistress of the House of Foxes, Countess Sheriel. Sheriel is known for her eloquence, for she uses it to great effect, a great deal of gossip and rumor, and it is to her credit. The girl wasn't shy and said she didn't want to be rude, but in her opinion, the prices of the dress in this store are a bit out of line with the budget that Sienna's family has. She thinks they should look for another place that doesn't have such high prices. So Sienna didn't have to talk to her. Her mom did. The woman politely replied and thanked her for her concern, although she really wanted to tell her that it was none of her business and they would figure out which store to buy the dress from. Then the woman explained that luckily Sienna had great news and a reason to come to the store. Namely that the girl is about to marry the Duke, and it will happen this Saturday. So they are in a great hurry. Accordingly, they have no time for such talk. Of course, the Countess did not expect to hear this. She was very much upset, and in order not to show her displeased face, she turned away so that no one could see the envious face of the... Afterwards, she turned to them again and asked if they were really talking about the Duke she thought of. The woman replied that of course, for there was no other Richard in this city. The girl wasn't afraid and asked why he would choose a wife like Sienna for him. The woman smiled sweetly and said that she wouldn't want to say such obvious things, but from the looks of it, they loved each other. After that, they hinted that the conversation was over and said that since the schedule was packed until Saturday, they needed to get everything done and go about their business. Countess Sheriel is in no hurry to get upset because it's not as bad as it seems. She's clearly got some kind of plan, and from the looks of it, she's definitely not going to be happy about this event. If she tries to spoil the party, it will not even be anything surprising. In any case, the girl's mother believes that they are lucky to meet Mrs. Sheriel, the woman who most likes to spread rumors in social circles. So perhaps tomorrow everyone in the district will know about the engagement with the Duke. And they need that, so that Sienna is not very upset and sad. Her mother reminded that even if someone tries to ruin the wedding, no one will succeed, and all these rumors, for them in it is a small profit, so it's too early to be sad. After a few hours, it was evening. They had no energy left to continue shopping, so they called a carriage and asked for a ride home as soon as possible. Mom made sure that being as many options as possible, so they came back with a few bags. Sienna was the most tired of all. She didn't want to go anywhere. She had to stay in the store for almost half a day, and after meeting that girl, she was in no mood for the whole day. She's very exhausted, and from the way she's feeling, it's going to take her a long time to sleep. It's a wonder how her mom could stand the strain. She even has the strength to smile and be happy that they had a successful shopping trip. She dragged all those bags away by herself, apparently all because of inspiration and a wonderful occasion. It's impossible to believe that just yesterday, Sienna broke up with one, and today is wedding preparations with her second fiancé. It's too intense for 2 days in a new body. As an instruction, very suddenly she heard a familiar voice again. It was the same duckling that she had forgotten about, and even from yesterday. But as soon as he appeared, she was madly happy, and even started to smile. The duckling is not happy about something and doesn't even try to hide it. He's pretty pissed off, and doesn't understand where she's been all day. The worst he can hear is that she spent all day with a man from the lion family again. The girl didn't understand who he was talking about at first, but then she realized that he meant Isaac. She was still having a hard time getting used to these names and double names. Sienna said it might sound strange, but she had already gotten into a new engagement. She was scared to tell him, but he would have found out anyway, so it was much easier and safer to tell him right away. The duckling started to get even angrier. He explained that he wasn't talking about her engagement, but that she should stop anything to do with the obscure relationship. He started yelling so hard that she had to shout him down and ask him to lower his voice a little because she could hear him just fine, and she didn't have to yell across the room to do that. At one point, he began to explain in more detail what he meant, the duckling reminding him not to forget her purpose. She's a duck destined to save the world, so no need to be distracted by something else that makes less useful and valuable sense. After that, the duckling asked for something else. He was tired of Sienna calling him a duckling. He has a name. This cute creature introduced himself for the first time, and it turns out his name is Eferitea Tianifkayes. Sienna could not immediately remember the name because it was too unusual. It would be very difficult to pronounce. So the duck allowed her to call him simply Mr. Ethel. According to him, not everyone can call him that. But for her sake, he was willing to make an exception. After that, the girl came back to the topic and asked how she would have the ability to save the world if she wasn't endowed with the proper powers. She's as much a duck as an Ethel. The duckling replied that he would not be able to tell everything in detail, but that another person was destined to be the savior. So far, he reads that's all she needs to know. He never explained how she's supposed to save the world, since he himself just said that she's not the savior. Perhaps he meant the Duke, ostensibly to be paid by another girl, and Sienna had something else, larger and more important, prepared for him. The next day came. Sienna doesn't know how she found the strength to wake up, but she did. As soon as she got out of bed and started to go about her business, a duckling clung to her right away. He keeps reminding her that she has a mission and that she needs to do it now, because the sooner she acts, the better chance she has of saving the world. The day of the ceremony, the ethereal family banquet hall, is very crowded, which means that everyone is very interested in attending what they think is a beautiful event. It's actually quite expected if Sienna was told that a thrice-turned woman was about to be betrothed to a duke from the most powerful family. She'd want to take a look at that too. In any case, all she had to do was not talk too much and wait for the banquet to end. Just as she tried to relax and not think about how long she was going to be here, she heard someone addressing her. It turned out to be some girl. Sienna didn't recognize her and didn't understand how or what to talk to her about. The stranger greeted the bride and said she was very happy to see her. She was pleasantly surprised when the news of Sienna and Duke Isaac Richard's engagement reached her. At this point, Sienna tried her best to remember her but couldn't. She has no idea who she is, but decided to pretend like she recognized her. She said her name very quietly, whispering so that nothing could be heard, when suddenly, some guy comes up to them and calls this girl she couldn't remember Artisha. The girl thought for a moment, and she seemed to remember who she was. Artisha Brunhilde in the novel Many Minor Families, including the Ducks, are almost always treated with disdain. They are considered weak and even not smart enough. The same goes for Brunhilde's family. The Geese family, like Ethereal, some of the least influential families. As time went on, Brunhilde grew tired of the cold and insulting attitudes of those around them, so they began to plot a cunning plan of revenge against all those who insulted them. But thanks to Rosetta, everything failed, and the Brunhilde family itself fell into disrepair. And only one person remained unharmed after those events, and that was Arisha Brunhilde, a girl with the reputation of a true angel. Arisha never supported her own family and their plans, but instead started helping Rosetta instead. In the meantime, since the guy had already arrived, the girl decided to introduce Sienna to her younger brother. His name is Rascal. Surprisingly, Sienna thought she could have guessed that, but somehow, she hadn't noticed how much they looked alike. She said she was very happy to meet you and of course thanked you for coming on such an important day. When suddenly, the girl starts remembering something very important that she wasn't even paying attention to. The blade with which Rosetta was wounded belonged to this very fellow, Rascal Brunhilde. It was a horrible moment. The girl could barely breathe and couldn't even find the strength to not even try to defend herself or move away. Looking at this sight, a sinister smile blossomed on the villain's face. He knew what he was doing, and had been preparing for that moment for a long time. So, now Sienna was getting a little uneasy. She was getting nervous and afraid to talk to this man. At the very least, he doesn't inspire any trust. She has a lot of questions. At the very least, if he intends to do something like this today. She really hadn't expected to see him just today, and now they had officially met. And now she was going to have to touch the hand of someone who was planning to do something terrible. As soon as the two of them saw the girl start to worry, the guy asked if everything was okay, as if he suspected she knew what kind of person he really was. In response, so as not to arouse any suspicion, she began to smile sweetly and said it was all because of excitement. After that, she again thanked them for coming to this wedding and for their time. And then she said that she had other guests to greet, so she would have to step back for a while and leave them alone. She shook good evening and left, and finally was able to relax a little, for the closer she got to this villain, the worse she felt. As soon as she left, the guy had only one thing on his mind, just to lighten up and talk to this Sienna again. Very curious as to why she interested him so much and what he wants to do during the next meeting. In fact, the girl heard everything. She made a decision for herself that this is the last time she will communicate with this man, so she will try to do everything possible to prevent this from happening. She feels too unsafe around him. On the way, she heard other people talking about themselves as usual, namely that she was supposedly unremarkable, had no talents, and her family was far from rich. She was used to hearing such words, so she just passed by. Of course, she reminded these women and realized who actually came to rejoice, and who was just funny to watch it. These two. They are just jealous. So, they can say nothing good cannot be able to rejoice for other people. They love nothing more than to complain about their lives and compare them to other people's, without trying to get closer to their ideal or dream life. Envy and discussing other people is all they're capable of. It is at this point that Isaac Richard appears in the hall. Everyone had already waited for him, so The guy apologized and said that there was too much that couldn't be put off for later. Of course, in this hall gathered all those who dream of being in the place of his bride. Unlike her, they still treat him very well and hope to the last that this ceremony will not take place. Surprisingly, but somehow he also very well heard the conversation of these two women, so decided to teach them a lesson and promised to answer any question. They did not miss the opportunity and immediately asked why he suddenly decided to be engaged to this daughter of Count Ethereal after all. In their opinion, there are plenty of more worthy girls around. After listening to all this, he laughed on purpose and asked if they really thought he would explain and justify himself to people he didn't care about. He hinted that they should mind their own business, and that was very right. In fact, the girl had expected quite the opposite from him, for since their last conversation, she had been sure that he would answer them just as he had answered her. But luckily, he had not allowed his fiancée to be laughed at by other people, and had made them apologize for their words. She really hadn't expected something like this from him, for she was sure that even in the presence of strangers, he would laugh and make her feel too awkward again. Lastly, to make sure that they were really sincere and truly in love, the guy kissed Sienna without even warning her. Except that despite this situation, the girl hadn't forgotten the fact of how he really felt about her, so she was a little uncomfortable, and if it wasn't for the people around her, she would have pushed him away right away and wouldn't have let him do that to her. After that, he started complimenting her and telling her why he loved her so much. The girl listened to all this and couldn't believe that he was so good at showing any situation as if it were a perfect picture. She was even a little afraid, for perhaps he might deceive her so often and not tell the truth. And then, not to linger long, he took her by the hand and began to go away somewhere. On the way, Sienna took the opportunity to immediately ask what that just was. She doesn't understand how to react to it and when to start getting angry, because in any case, sooner or later, this moment will definitely become a... In response, the guy explained that he thought she would be grateful for it. So, he doesn't understand why she started to resent it and what she doesn't like. He wanted what was best and ended up listening to some accusations. Realizing that he was probably right, Sienna calmed down and began to continue talking about the topic. She doesn't know how to react to it, what's normal and what's not. All these insincere emotions and the fake wedding every day makes her wonder if this is how she imagined her new life. Perhaps after all this, when she had suffered and got what she wanted, she would never again have any doubt that everything was there when it should be. In the end, she did not make a conflict. The girl calmed down and apologized for her behavior, because today not only she is nervous, but he is also nervous. At some point, Sienna didn't notice how she was in the very place where the ceremony was taking place. The guy addressed her several times, and it was only on the third time that she heard his voice and realized what was happening. He asked to take the ring, because there are a lot of people looking at them, and it would be very strange if she was insecure about it. Meanwhile, Isaac Richard gave her the ring, and as soon as it was on her hand, the boy kissed his sweetheart and said that now it was her turn. It's a very crucial and long-awaited moment, which means there are still less days left until they break up, and it will be the last time she marries a man she didn't love and will never love again. Now she realizes that once that ring is on his finger, it means they'll be my wife. She'll have her responsibilities, and he'll have his. It's a very crucial moment, and literally in a second, she hesitates more than once and thinks it's not too late to give up and do what she really wants to do. We can only hope that the irritation will go away after this, and that they will be able to do it without problems. It would be strange if at this moment, everything went too calmly. The girl just thought about it as she heard something happening behind her. The two of them turned around and saw what they were afraid of. Strangers appeared in the hall. They started to spoil the ceremony and harm some guests. Everyone started to shout very loudly because no one understands what is happening and what they did wrong. It looks like someone planned it. There's no way it could have happened so suddenly, without any plan or preparation. When suddenly, one of these people looked in her direction. This guy stopped as if he was about to walk right up to her. The situation is so unexpected that no one had time to react, and does not understand if it even makes sense. It seems that it cannot be worse. But just a second later, their chief ordered to destroy someone. The girl lost the power of speech. She thought that it was about her. Everyone started to run towards her. At that moment, she was speechless, unable to move and frozen in one place, as if something was preventing her from doing so. She realized that there was nowhere else to go, and started screaming very loudly and begging to be left alone, when suddenly, these people ran past and even asked to get out of the way, which means that the girl was a little mistaken. She got scared before time and thought that that was it. They had come for her, and it was useless to resist. I wonder who they ran to and who they wanted to take out too, if not her. At that moment, she looked at her husband and thought that maybe they had come for him. Even if that was the case, things were not going according to plan. Everything was going to go smoothly. And in the end, there was no telling whether the Duke would be able to stay alive or not. Suddenly, she felt the energy coming from this man. He uses not only special items, but also a power that cannot be seen at first glance. Sienna wondered why her husband was doing nothing, and standing where he was standing, she expected to see some action or fear. But none of that happened. She's sure they won't last long at this rate. They'll have to do something, otherwise they'll just take advantage of the situation and go quietly to their master. Sienna felt that it was up to her to handle this situation. She tensed up a lot. She closed her eyes and didn't realize what had happened. She felt what she needed to think about, and at some point, she heard complete silence. After an incredible burst of energy, some miracle happened. The girl unknowingly saved people without even knowing she was capable of it. She literally pushed all those villains away from her and her husband. It looked like something incredible. So far, everyone is trying to regain consciousness and understand what it was, because no one expected it from her. These guys were very scared of Sienna, because at least no one warned them that this could happen. It's not surprising, because even she didn't understand where she got the strength to do it. Sienna looks at all of this, and for some reason she's sure she's just imagining it. Maybe her husband did it all. She doesn't think it's possible, or that she had any powers at all. Never happened before, and now, at the very last moment, something happened that no one expected. The girl looked at the Duke and asked him to say only one thing, that he was all right and these people would not touch them anymore. She was very scared and wanted to get away to safety. He gradually began to calm her down and thought that first she should at least have dinner and regain her strength, and only then would he talk to her about what had happened. Though really, he's insanely curious to know how she did it and why. Until now, she's been hiding the fact that she has such amazing abilities. The girl did not immediately understand what she was talking about. She refused to believe that she had done it. Her husband's behavior seemed a little funny to her, for he looked at her as if he had nothing to do with it. It's very interesting to see her reaction when he says she did it. For example, now, Sienna looks at him and doesn't understand why he's so surprised, because it's probably not the first time he's had to defend himself in this way. In the end, except for that situation, the ceremony ended quite well. The girl thought at first that everything was ruined, but fortunately, everything went well. They even decided to go out a little later to talk about everything that happened during the event. The guy came first, waited for her for a few minutes, and said he thought she wasn't coming already. They are very unaccustomed to having a ring on their hand. And of course there was a joke that she was less unaccustomed to it than he was. They walked a bit, talked about plans, and literally after half an hour said goodbye. He had a lot of things to do that needed to be solved right now. The girl did not say anything and said that we could talk next time. Besides, she herself wants to have some rest and be together. It is necessary to think over everything and realize what happened. It turns out that some guests changed their minds to go home. They wanted to stay. After the husband and wife left the hall, there were many other interesting things. The bride was not interested in details. She had seen enough, so she asked not to tell anything that might upset her. The maid listened to her and did not continue to talk on the subject. She brought the bouquet and said that the Duke had sent them. It had been several times. First he began to send bouquets, then diamonds, rubies, pearls, and other costly ornaments, and now suddenly he came to visit unannounced, although usually he always gave at least a few days' notice so that she had time to prepare and knew what to expect. In his defense, Richard asked if he couldn't visit his wife when he wanted to. The girl said there was no problem, but it would have been better if she knew in advance that he was coming. Besides, giving notice is difficult with everyone, and she didn't understand why he didn't do it this time. Plus, she's very interested in why he's taking his time to break up when the story says it's long overdue. In a few days, Isaac is supposed to publicly announce he's leaving her on the day of the debutante ball at the Delcado. But for some reason, there's no hint of divorce in this situation. The girl planned it all a little differently and doesn't understand what he's waiting for. She's starting to get freaked out by the fact that things are starting to look like he's the opposite, wanting to continue this relationship and make it work to be together as long as possible. Instead of answering normally and explaining everything, the Duke asked her what she wasn't satisfied with. Supposedly he was trying, giving expensive gifts, and doing his best to make her like everything. He even assumed that she was already tired of him and pretended only to make her feel sorry for him, apologize and feel bad. Supposedly, she started talking about the subject and might have offended him. Sienna doesn't understand what's going on because they had a completely different agreement from the beginning, and now it's like he doesn't want to let her go and is trying to keep the relationship alive.